my strategy about tight end this year, number one, is I think you should have one. I feel like
that's a good idea.
I think you should not ignore the position. That's strategy. No, honestly, like I think when you
Phenomenal
sort of
work.
What?
Phenomenal work.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
God bless.
Hey,
producer Steven, do me a favor. Just clip that off and send that to the Smithsonian and the Emmy Award committee, if you will.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. We're glad you're back for more deep dive strategies for your drafts.
Hey.
That was a
Don't
real
speak
good
for
one.
all of us.
Right.
Connor is glad you're back. I feel like you should have free will.
Well, maybe you do. Maybe you're missing all of this right now after
exactly.
watching the tight end primer.
There
Because
you go.
today's the wide receiver primer. This is a true deep dive.
Yep.
Connor Rogers alongside Matthew Berry, Jay Croucher. Let's see how you top yesterday's grade A performance.
The only way is up for your 3 out of 10 humor.
Wow, that might be a curve.
Yeah.
Listen, my wife has said to me many times, I get that. All right, let's move on.
You're just flushing that one like a bad loss.
You know what's interesting is
Or not.
I think I've told you guys this story. I think I'm going to derail this for 1 second very quickly. But I've definitely written about this story before. But when I was in college a million years ago, I actually participated in a stand-up comedy competition that was actually sponsored by Doritos. That was to find the funniest college student in all of America. And so what they would do is they hired this professional comedian that would go to every single college, and he would to help set up he was a professional comedian, right? So he goes to every single college to sort of help all these awkward college kids getting up on stage and doing, in essence, amateur stand-up. By the way, I won Syracuse. By the way, I made the national semifinals. No big deal, MBD. That's not the point of the story.
Is the routine on tape somewhere?
I
would love to see that.
I gotta hope not. But I'm skinnier
People
with a lot
funny
more
in
hair.
Syracuse, though?
What?
Are people funny in Syracuse?
I'm saying it's very interesting
There's nothing
place.
else to do in Syracuse but to
Right.
laugh. But here's the reason. Here's there's a longer version of this story, but the short version is that the comedian, I'll never forget his name, was Leroy Seabrooks. And he would tell jokes and he would get laughs, and then he would tell a joke that fell flat, and he would just be like, you know what? He goes, most of these jokes, those are for you, but that joke, if you hear a joke that isn't funny, that one was for Leroy. I think that joke's funny. So whatever, as we go along during the show, if there's a joke that you don't think's funny,
It's not about everyone else.
You just have to understand, oh, that one was for Leroy.
Yes. Or for Matthew.
Right, yeah. Well, anyway, so cut to later in the show, and there's one kid up there that is absolutely awful. Hang on, I'm almost done with the story. Actually awful he's awful. This kid is he's sweating bullets. He's up there, crickets, right? He can't get any jokes at all off, and he eventually he tells a joke so bad that it completely bombs, and you could hear a pin drop in this entire comedy club that overall had been going pretty well, and he just stares at it like a deer in the headlights. He's like, and just that one was for Leroy. Crowd goes crazy. Saves it, right? Saves it. And so ever since then, that has been a thing. By the way, my LLC is called This One's for Leroy. And so my point is that some of the jokes that I tell on this show are not for either of you or the audience at home. They're for Leroy, and they're for me. So there you go. Long way to go.
Well,
but
as producer Pete whispered in our ear, that story was for Leroy.
yes, 1,000%.
Your ongoing rivalry with producer Pete is
It's whatever.
at an all-time high.
I don't care. You know what? I enjoyed that story. I
That
don't
was
care.
fun.
It's actually a fun
It
story.
wasn't quite
But
for
I just-
Leroy. Leroy was in the neighborhood,
Yeah,
but he didn't
it's
come
fun.
home.
Yes,
So that was
I'm
fun.
for Leroy. I'll never forget that.
All right, so the wide receivers. Just like we kicked off yesterday, talking about that you should take a tight end.
Sure.
What is your overall approach to drafting wide receivers this year? Because the
Outside
modern
of
trend
taking
is
them.
basically everybody just loads up on them right out of the gate at this point.
Yeah, look, I think it's important to understand what your league settings are and obviously for everything, but especially for wide receivers. How many wide receivers do you play? Are you in a 2 running back, 3 wide receiver league, or is it 2 and 2? Knowing the depth of the position and how many you can start, I think is important. Obviously, half point PPR versus standard, that has a big effect on the scoring of wide receivers as well. And I also think just if you can know sort of are you in a league that tends to get a little bit running back crazy? Do you have somebody that likes kind of the trendy young players, because we've got a lot of really trendy young wide receivers this year? Just understanding sort of where that's at. Look, of my top 10, I got 7 wide receivers. So I am wide receiver heavy in the first round. I think it's important in the first 2 rounds to have at least one elite wide receiver. But having said that if you decide you want to go running back, if you end up going, if you decide you want to go running back early, you want an elite running back, get one of the elite guys, because I will say that I like the wide receivers in the 3 to 5 round range more than the running backs that are going in the 3 to 5 round range.
Yep, I think that makes sense. I think the key as well with wide receivers at the top of the draft is, I believe the stat is wide receivers on average miss 1.0 games per season, and running backs miss 2.0 games per season. So just less attrition. At the top of your draft, you want to just not lose it straight away. And so just there's a higher floor for wide receivers, and it varies amongst these top guys, and we'll get into it. But certainly, I think in general, if you think 2 guys are neck and neck, top of the draft, you should defer to the receiver.
Over the years, there is usually less variance and more consistency among the elite wide receivers than there are the elite running backs.
Let's look at your top 10 here, Matthew, because we have to start by kicking off with some news. CeeDee Lamb, who is number 1, officially signs a 4-year, $136 million extension on Monday, $100 million guaranteed. So some feel good for your guy Eights.
Yeah, exactly. Well deserved for a friend of the podcast, friend of mine, CeeDee Lamb. I call him Eights. Everyone calls him Eights. There you go. Look at that. Absolutely right. He can be given away. He could, doesn't need to steal the phone anymore. He just, like from his girlfriend, like just, hey, there you go. Everyone, phone for everyone. CeeDee Lamb gets paid, well deserved. Happy to see that as well. By the way, and you know who drinks free today? Everyone that's drafted CeeDee Lamb, because you get bailed out. There you go.
You're feeling real good now.
Drafters drink for free. He's my number 1 guy. 13 games last year with 15 or more fantasy points. No wide receiver in the NFL had more than that. Led all players with red zone targets last year. Led the NFL in receptions as well. And we think about what Dallas has done this year in the offseason, and the answer is nothing, right? I mean, like, it's his competition for targets is Jake Ferguson and Brandon Cooks.
Yep.
And then, Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott in the backfield. Like, it is going to be all CeeDee Lamb all the time on what should be a pass-heavy offense.
Yep, and I think of these top 5 wide receivers, they all kind of have a little bit of a flaw, except for CeeDee Lamb.
Correct.
Because Tyreek Hill is already dealing with injuries. He's been injured the past 2 seasons. He has a quarterback who seems to struggle in December all the time. Also plays in a division of really tough defenses. Jamar Chase just plays outside in the cold weather, again in a tough division of opposing defenses.
And there's contract questions. He's been practicing.
Yes.
He's come back to practice, but still, does he to say, I'm not playing until I get a deal. Who knows?
Suiting up is different.
It's different, right? So we don't know what's going on with his contract. And yes, he plays outdoors.
And then you look at Justin Jefferson, who I think has an argument to be number 2 or even number 1, but his quarterback is Sam Darnold. And these other guys have quarterbacks. Like, with Justin Jefferson, it's become a math thing where it's like, how many yards does Sam Darnold have to throw for him to provide number 1 fantasy wide receiver value in terms of being number 1 on this list? Like, Sam Darnold has to be over 4,000 yards passing if Justin Jefferson is going to do that. So that is the question with him. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, I kind of think doesn't have that many questions. He's probably the second, I would say he's the second highest floor guy after CeeDee Lamb.
Right, but the question about Amon-Ra St. Brown is, like, he scored 10 touchdowns last year, but can he score 10 again? What's the touchdown equity for Amon-Ra St. Brown? By the way, we love his floor because he plays indoors for so many of his games, 14 of the 17 games for Amon-Ra St. Brown. But a couple of those games, of the 3 outdoor games the Lions play, 2 of them come in the fantasy playoffs. And so are you like, hey, I'm going to ride Amon-Ra into the playoffs, and then when I need him the most, that's hard to say. Second year of Sam Laporta as well. Does he take some of those red zone looks? Does he suddenly become much more of a touchdown threat? So, again, Amon-Ra St. Brown is my ride or die from last year. I love the Sun God. I agree with you. I think he's very safe. To me, that's the sort of the tier. I think you could make an argument. You could make an argument to include A.J. Brown and Garrett Wilson in that tier. But again, as we get into sort of questions, Jay, to your point, like A.J. Brown was awesome last year. But there were a couple of games where he just suddenly disappeared. And again, they have DeVonta Smith and they add Saquon Barkley, who is going to demand a lot more touches than what they had last year. Goddard should be healthy for the full year. Just does A.J. Brown have the same kind of year, or is he just going to be like an upper tier wide receiver? Is this the year that A.J. Brown makes that leap into elite wide receiver 1, or is he just going to stay where he's sort of been the last 2 years, which is like really high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1? But I don't know that you can put him in the same tier as a Lamb, as a Hill, as a Jefferson. And then on Garrett Wilson, like, we love the talent. We believe in the talent. We believe in the target share, but he's got a 40-year-old quarterback.
Yeah, he needs
in
touchdowns.
a tough division, right?
Yeah, he needs touchdowns. Like, 3 and 4 touchdown seasons. That's got to crank up to 8 to 10 if you want to be with the big dogs in this group. Now, Tyrod Taylor being the backup, he's a guy that can support a number 1 wide receiver, so that makes you feel a little better. But just the reality is for Garrett Wilson, we're talking about going from being an 1,100-ish 3-touchdown player to a 1,500-yard-ish 10-touchdown player, which I think he could do. But once again, you want to see it.
Yep. And also, like, among all these elite guys where the margins are so thin between them, the things that I always kind of defer back to is, do you play in a dome? Like, a dome is such a big advantage, and that's where CeeDee Lamb, Jefferson, Amon-Ra, they separate themselves there. Do you have quarterback stability? And CeeDee, again, he ticks that box in the biggest way possible, as does Jared Goff supporting Amon-Ra, Chase, Tua, and that's the question about Darnold. And also, it is a little bit of a question with Garrett Wilson, just because of the health concerns with Rodgers, and he's 40 years old and we haven't seen him out there. And then the other thing that I really like is, do you just play in the slot a little bit more? Because the slot is such a cheat code for PPR,
100%.
And that's how Cooper Kupp was able to deliver his 2021 season, and that's a real benefit from Amon-Ra. They've used CeeDee Lamb more in the slot as well in Dallas.
So, Matthew, you talked about how the tier can kind of start to separate maybe after Garrett Wilson, depending how you evaluate him. So then tier 2 starts with Puka Nacua at 8?
Yeah, it does. So Garrett Wilson, like, to me, I feel like if I leave the first round, especially in a 12-team league, if I leave the first round with any one of those 7 wide receivers, I'm feeling good, along with, obviously, McCaffrey, Bijan, or Brees, right?
So let's talk about Puka
Nacua. But, like, then you get into this kind of a teardrop, right? So I think it kind of goes from Nacua to Chris Olave, and we'll look at the next tier. But to me, that's the next tier. Is that tier 2?
That's 8 to 12.
Yeah, 8 to 12, exactly. Where I feel good about that. We can talk about Puka Nacua.
Yeah, Puka Nacua
Jay's
is an
best
interesting
friend.
one. Yeah, your best friend, but you are higher
Not sure he's going to be
Cooper
after
Kupp this year.
Well, that's the problem, right? Like, Nacua, his issue is, one, he was able to stay fully healthy last year. I don't think people have maybe fully absorbed how much his production fell off after the first 4 weeks of the season, where he was just never getting more than like 5 receptions. He was barely getting double-digit targets, and just in that offense where McVay likes to run the ball, Cooper Kupp, by all accounts, is healthy, and in camp the reports have been that Cooper Kupp has been the wide receiver and not Puka Nacua. So I just think that there are concerns about Puka from that front. Like, I think you just have to, just on average, regress the idea that he is going to be the Rams' #1 wide receiver because he's younger than Kupp, and Kupp has dealt with these issues. But if Kupp stays healthy for the full year, I think there is a very good chance that Cooper Kupp is wide receiver 1 on the Rams over Nacua.
For sure. I mean, there's a massive connection between Stafford and Kupp that has been there for years and years and years. All the jokes about the Breakfast Club, but that's true. I mean, you've got Stafford, a veteran quarterback, Kupp is a veteran wide receiver. They know where each other are all the time. And when we spoke to Puka Nacua at the Super Bowl, he gave a ton of credit to Cooper Kupp for sort of taking him under his wing and helping him with Stafford and with the offense. But so far through camp, it seems like because Nacua's been banged up and Kupp's been very healthy, like Kupp's like at the moment the #1 guy, and I don't know why all of a sudden Nacua is showing up and all of a sudden Stafford's like, oh yeah, Cooper Kupp, never mind.
Yeah.
I mean, Cooper Kupp was the #1 not only the #1 wide receiver in fantasy, but like the best wide receiver in fantasy football history.
Yes.
2 years ago.
Yeah, and had the greatest wide receiver season in the history of the one Super Bowl MVP. Like, it was the greatest season at that position that we have seen. And I just think with Nacua as well, like a small thing, but like there are some other guys in this top 10 where if they got marginalized into being the second option, like you would hear about it and they would be arguing for targets like DeVonta Adams isn't going to cop being like wide receiver 2 or like getting fewer targets. I think Puka Nacua is going to be fine if he slides back in his role a little bit. Doesn't seem like he's going to be like leaking to the media that he needs more targets.
I'm not worried about Puka Nacua. My point has always been like if you're investing in the Rams offense, I prefer Cooper Kupp at cost to Puka Nacua. But do we think Puka Nacua is unbelievable? Yes. Do we think he has a big year and that the Rams offense overall is really good? We do.
So, Matthew, is that why you buy into him and have him at 8 over
Yes.
Marvin Harrison Jr. and Drake London, who are the clear alpha wide receivers of their offense?
They are, but again, like in both cases, you're sitting there with both because Nacua's done it.
Right.
We haven't seen it from Harrison or London before. Like, we watched the college tape of both guys. We love the talent of both guys, but the fact of the matter is that Marvin Harrison has not done it yet, right? I mean, like we haven't seen him on the pro level. And then you think about Drake London. Drake London has not done it on the pro level. Again, we're putting a lot of faith in the idea that, quarterback upgrade with Kirk Cousins, coaching upgrade with Zach Robinson. And I buy into all that, obviously, when you see my rankings. I'm in on Drake London this year. I'm in on Marvin Harrison Jr. this year, but you asked me why are they ranked below Puka Nacua? Because there's less question marks about Puka to me.
Yep.
The only question mark is 1 versus 2 with Cooper Kupp, but the truth of the matter is even with Kupp out there, he was averaging 15.5 fantasy points per game, 27% target share. He saw almost 100 targets. He averaged over 92 yards from scrimmage per game. That was 5th most among wide receivers. Like, he didn't have crazy numbers like he did without Kupp, but with Kupp there, he was still very productive.
Yep. What scares me, though, his final 10 games of the season, he got more than 5 receptions once. He saw double-digit targets once. Now, that's a little bit unfair because if you throw in the playoff game against Detroit, he was 9 receptions on 10 targets for 181 yards and a touchdown. So, look, I think he's going to be better than that on average. But also, the other thing with Nacua, I think of young wide receivers, he might be the biggest injury risk out there because of the way that he plays, how physical he is with his blocking. Yep. Like, we thought he was done for the season after he got hurt against Cleveland, where he went down and seemed really bad. Then he comes back in and he's fine. Just a little thing. I think he dealt with some stuff in college as well.
Yeah, he was back up.
So it's just a little bit of a concern because he does play a very physical brand.
So those 3 guys carry us into the next tier. They're in tier 2, and that also in our next group, 11 to 20, includes Nico Collins at 11, Chris Olave at 12 before we go into tier 3, Matthew. So the break here is between Olave and DeVonta Adams.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a clear line there. And honestly, I think in my next rankings update, I might move Waddle ahead of Adams. Adams make me nervous, just with the age and the Minshew and the whole thing. But anyway, let's talk about Nico Collins for a second. 13 full games with C.J. Stroud, average over 91 receiving yards per game, 18.8 fantasy points per game, had a 23% target share in all of his healthy games. And, the other thing is these aren't dink and dunks. 11.9 yards per target, that was second highest among qualified wide receivers. C.J. Stroud, who we all think is that dude, made Nico, he has no problem chucking it deep to Nico Collins. And you just sort of think about, it's one of the reasons why I think Joe Mixon is interesting this year, because again, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Stephon Diggs, pick your poison. All 3 of them, you have to bring somebody with them. All 3 of them kick the lid off the defense. And so, I just think you're going to have to play 2 high safety against these guys all the time, and I just think there's going to be an empty box for Mixon.
Yeah, they have speed, and I agree with you on Mixon completely. I think we almost, not we, but everyone, overall overlooks Nico Collins. How good Nico Collins is, because he wasn't a first-round pick. Yep. He was a late bloomer in fantasy by all metrics of how long it took him to break out. I think Nico Collins is just so much better than what Stephon Diggs is right now. And Tank Dell's awesome, but Tank Dell's a totally different player. 165 pounds, burner. He has a specific role in that offense. I think people have fear with Diggs there about, hey, can Collins still command this target share? I don't. I just think he's so much better right now, and that rapport with Stroud is built in. And Nico Collins is an absolute big-bodied monster in the red zone that will get his touchdown equity as well.
Yep. To me, the most indicative stat around Nico Collins that speaks to how amazing he is on the field is that he was 2nd in the entire NFL in yards per route run last year. And that stat is meaningful because number 1 in the league was Tyreek Hill, 2 is Collins, and then 3, 4, 5, Brandon Ayuk, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb. That is the company that Nico Collins was in last season.
Yeah, it's crazy company for Collins.
And the only knock on Nico Collins is literally target share because Diggs and Dell are there. But I agree with you. Nico Collins is that good. C.J. Stroud is that good. And we're not sure yet about, of all the Texans wide receivers, Tank Dell coming back from the injury, Stephon Diggs, who, just seemed to hit a wall over the second half of last year. There's less questions about Nico Collins than either of the other guys he's competing with for targets. You feel much better about Nico than you do the other guys. I'm in on Tank Dell this year. Tank's my guy, but I'm just saying, if you want to take a contrarian view, that's the anti-argument there. But yeah, Nico's just awesome.
So you mentioned Jaylen Waddle, how he might move up, Matthew, and eventually lead that tier 3. Is this a year where he can maybe close the gap, not close it entirely, but make it tighter between him and Tyreek Hill?
I hope so. I mean, listen, this is somebody who, coming out of college was,
massive talent.
Massive talent as well.
And he's been good. It's not like he's been disappointing at all. He just is in an offense with Tyreek Hill.
Well, exactly. Any other offense, he's the number 1 wide receiver as well. Jaylen Waddle has 14 games over the last 2 years since McDaniel took over. 14 games with at least 7 targets. And in those games, he's averaging 20 fantasy points per game. 70 receptions, at least 70 receptions, and at least 1,000 receiving yards in all 3 career seasons as well. The only concern with Jaylen Waddle last year is that there was an inconsistency, right? Under 13 fantasy points in 8 of his 14 games last year. There was a little bit of an inconsistency there as they sort of struggled to move the ball around. Part of the other problem is it's hard to catch the ball when Devon Achane is running 80 yards for a touchdown every single time. Like, they had so many weird games last year in terms of some of like the big runs and like, you know, that I feel like it'll be more of a normal year this year for the Dolphins. And so I do think this is the year that Waddle sort of puts it all together and closes the gap between him and Tyreek Hill.
Yep, he's just banged up as well at the start of last season, which I think always gets overlooked. I would expect from Waddle more resembling what he did 2 years ago, which we finished as wide receiver 8 overall in fantasy, 1,300 plus yards. And that's not like Tyreek Hill's doing nothing. Tyreek Hill had 1,700 yards that year in wide receiver 2. Tua has shown that he can support 2 different top 8 wide receivers in that Mike McDaniel system. So with health, I think that Waddle can get there. Again, just the end of the season is brutal if you're going to use that as a differentiator. The last 2 games at the Jets, at the Browns.
Another guy in this tier, in DeVonta Smith, Matthew, obviously a great talent and a good offense, but there were just a few too many games last year where he entirely disappeared, inexplicably.
50% of his games last year, he had 5 or fewer targets. Not receptions, 5 or fewer targets.
Disappearing,
Again, part of the issue of him being on such a good team in the Eagles, they have a very good defense, right? Or in theory, they'll have a very good defense last year. And you've got A.J. Brown, you've got Goddard, and now you add Barkley to the mix as well. And so that's the only issue with DeVonta Smith is just like there are games where he just disappears. So in terms of like consistency, it's tough. But here's somebody who's out there a ton, like 8th in routes per game. He led all wide receivers with a 96% snap share. 8 different games with 7 or more targets. It was a little bit feast or famine with DeVonta Smith. Hopefully he gets a little bit more consistency this year, but that's the reason why that he's down here at wide receiver 20 for me, is just because when he's great, but just there are weeks where it just feels like, what happened?
Yep. I think as well, DeVonta Smith, maybe some people have forgotten about it, but he went through a really rough patch in the middle of the year where it was almost like he kind of got the yips for a little bit, where he only brought in 5 of 11 targets against the Jets. He had 1 catch in a game against the Rams. So it just felt like he was in his own head a little bit. And then he got out of that, had a massive playoff game that, again, no one paid attention to because they were getting blown out by the Bucs. But I think he'll bounce back and he'll be fine.
So the other thing is that the Eagles' offense the whole team was a mess last year in terms of what, there was.
It just felt a little off. Everything felt a little off.
It just felt off.
Maybe Kellen Moore finds consistency with it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it just felt like, there was all sorts of questions on the defensive side of the ball as well. Seemed like Brian Johnson was in over his head a little bit as offensive coordinator last year for the Eagles. So the whole, season just felt discombobulated. So hopefully there's a little more consistency this season.
So to recap, that tier 3 starts with Davante Adams at 13, then Deebo Samuel, Jaylen Waddle, who could be on the move, Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp, Malik Neighbors, Brandon Ayuk, DeVonta Smith. Let's take a look at Matthew's wide receiver rankings 21 to 30, because tier 3 continues into DJ Moore at 21, Stephon Diggs at 22, and then it ends with DK Metcalf at 23, Matthew.
Yeah, that's the next tier as well. Pittman starting tier 4 there. Here's the thing about DK Metcalf, right? Ryan Grubb is going to push the ball, right? No team led the FBS, and no team had more passing yards per game from 2022 to 2023 than Washington and the Huskies under Ryan Grubb. They're going to push the ball down. So each of the past 4 seasons, here's a list, right? Here's a list of all the wide receivers that had at least 225 fantasy points each of the last 4 years. Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams, Stephon Diggs, Mike Evans, and DK Metcalf. The crown is yours. I'm just saying here, DK Metcalf, such a big. Thank you very much. That one's for Leroy too.
No, that was for us. We both like that.
Fair enough. Look, the other thing about DK is he's such a big target in the end zone, in the red zone. Top 5 in end zone targets every season of his career. Every season of his career, this is a guy who's top 5 in end zone targets. He's just built different. And so if you buy into sort of the resurgence of the Seattle offense under Ryan Grubb, Lockett feels like JSN is sort of ascending and Lockett is kind of backing off a little bit. But ultimately, We like Geno. We think Geno's good enough to get the ball to somebody, and the person he's going to get the ball to is DK Metcalf.
I think Geno's going to be really good in this offense. You watch the last 2 years of Michael Penix. He went from being an afterthought transfer to a top 10 pick in the draft. And I'm not taking away the credit from Penix, but Grubb was a huge part of that. And Grubb's going to really help all these wide receivers, but specifically Geno with the pass attack.
Yep. I think that was the idea that Geno was going to play a bit in that last preseason game and give him some extended run. First drive goes 4 for 5, 158 passer rating, touchdown. It's like, all right, I'm done. Let's just get him out of there. He looks so good. So I think that, he should have a big year. I think that Seattle team overall is just going to be a little more modernized. They've gone from the oldest head coach in the league to now the youngest. I think there's some exciting things happening in Seattle, and I want to buy shares, both in that offense and defense.
So Tier 4 starts at wide receiver 24, Michael Pittman Jr. We've talked about him being a floor player a lot. I want to stop at 25 quickly, Matthew, because that's Rashee Rice. Is there a world where maybe he's close to breaking into that Tier 3, as it feels like we're getting far away from him being suspended this season?
If you knew for a fact Rashee Rice was not getting suspended, I prefer him over everyone else on this page. Give me him over DJ Moore. Give me him over Metcalf and Diggs. Like, Rashee Rice is that good on that offense with Patrick Mahomes. The knock on Rashee Rice, honestly, is just, he might get suspended. We don't know. Yes, they added Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown. Kelsey's still there, a lot of mouths to feed, but what we saw from Rashee Rice and the connection between him and Mahomes over the second half of last year and in the playoffs, I think, again, I'm speaking specifically from a football point of view here. I think Rashee Rice is a special football player. And so, and I honestly think Rashee Rice is kind of a value this year. I have no inside sources on this. I'm just trying to read the tea leaves. I don't think Rashee Rice gets suspended this year. The court date's not until December. And traditionally, again, I'm definitely not speaking for the NFL, but just if you look at sort of history, generally speaking, what we have seen the NFL do when there is a situation like this is they have basically let the court system play out, let the legal process play out. Every person's innocent until proven guilty. Rashee Rice is going to have his day in court. That process will play out. And then if and when there's a determination by the legal system in America, then there may be saying, okay, a jury has heard the evidence, this has been the decision, and based on this, then we can make a decision as to whether or not this player should be suspended. Again, that's not always the case, and I'm not speaking for anything other than just my own personal opinion, but I think back to the Kamara thing, where same thing, Kamara 2 years ago, people were nervous about drafting him because they're like, he's going to get suspended.
It tanked him at the time.
Right, and we were like, I don't think he's going to get suspended. I think this gets punted till no pun intended, till the next year, and that's what ended up happening. Alvin Kamara had a 3-game suspension last year in 2023, but he was a value in 2022 because so many people were concerned that the suspension was going to happen there. No guarantees, but I feel like Rashee Rice, if there is a suspension coming for him, I feel like it happens in 2025.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things too where we get so in the weeds and looking at the stats and what happened last season and ranking all these guys. Sometimes you just have to regress a little bit to less simplicity. And here are the simple things. So it's the same thing with Cooper Kupp. Like 2 of the past 3 years, Cooper Kupp has been wide receiver 1 on a points per game basis. And then last year he was hurt. And now this year he's going outside the top 20 wide receivers on ESPN. That just doesn't make any sense. Rashee Rice is the second best receiver that Patrick Mahomes has ever played with. And he's really, and his court date is like December 9th. And so he's really going to go outside, he's going outside the top 30 wide receivers on Yahoo. So I just don't understand that. I think that there are worlds where Rashee Rice outperforms the likes of Puka Nacua and Nico Collins. That's within the realm of outcomes. Those guys are going 20 receivers higher.
Rashee Rice being a top 15 fantasy wide receiver this year, top 12 is not insane at all. Again, we like Xavier Worthy, we like Hollywood Brown. They'll take some deep shots there, but in terms of who's on the field every snap, Rashee Rice is going to play almost every snap.
Yep.
Tier 4 continues with Tank Dell at 26, T. Higgins at 27, Zay Flowers at 28, Christian Kirk at 29, Terry McLaurin at 30 here, Matthew, who, gets to play with Jayden Daniels, who looked great this summer
Yeah,
in Cliff Kingsbury's offense. Could this be maybe a career year for Scary Terry?
I think it could. And look, again, no Jahan Dotson. I've said this before. At some point this season, Luke McCaffrey's going to be a thing, but I don't know if it's going to be immediately. And so, there's a scenario where in this pass first offense that Terry McLaurin has a north of 30% target share as well. Here's the other thing that, I know a lot of people want to have fun with Cliff Kingsbury, and it's been pointed out in the preseason how, like, I think he's played 28 snaps and 27 of them, McLaurin's lined up in the exact same spot, and they're like, oh, here we go.
It was outside wide receiver. Everybody wants to see the slot usage.
Yeah, exactly. But you know what? He did the same thing with DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona, and in 2020, DeAndre Hopkins was wide receiver 5 under Cliff Kingsbury on a points per game basis. 2022, he was wide receiver 9. 2021, he was wide receiver 19. So 3 straight years, DeAndre Hopkins was a top 20 fantasy wide receiver. 2 of the 3 years under Kingsbury, he was a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. Any one of those finishes would be the best finish of Terry McLaurin's career from a fantasy points per game. I get it. The route chart is whatever. I don't know. Maybe it's a lack of creativity from Cliff Kingsbury, or maybe he's just like, you know what? He's the only guy I got. Why am I gonna give away the goods here in the preseason? Like, I'm just trying to get Jayden Daniels comfortable in the offense. Just run the same vanilla routes. You know what I mean? And I'm not worried about it. We'll get it. Interesting. Terry McLaurin, I think, is Connor, you tell me what you think here. To me, he is one of the best route runners in the NFL. He's, and thinking about what Jayden Daniels does well, I think even if he's lined up outside every single snap of his career this year, you know what I mean? Like, he'll run enough different routes that they will find him. I think the talent of Jayden Daniels, the talent of Terry McLaurin, and the massive target share make up for any coaching potential deficiencies. And I'm not even convinced that it's going to be a coaching deficiency.
Because he's such a good route runner, we forget that he's really fast. It's one of those weird things. Like, nobody thinks of Terry McLaurin as this true 4-3 guy, but he is. And Jayden Daniels wants to throw the ball down the field. We saw it on his first drive against the Jets. He checked out of a play and pushed the ball down the field. So that's going to help him as well in this offense.
Yeah. I just don't trust Cliff. Just don't trust the whole Cliff experience. I don't believe he's become a new man in Kotau or wherever he went to.
But okay, but isn't that a NFL argument and not a fantasy argument? Well, again, obviously DeAndre Hopkins is a different kind of wide receiver than Terry McLaurin. But my point is that was a highly visible, getting a lot of defensive attention wide receiver able to produce fantasy points under Cliff Kingsbury for multiple years? And the answer is yes. And oh, by the way, Hopkins almost never went into the slot under Cliff either. I mean, he was just outside.
Yeah, I think Cliff might have seen God a little bit towards the end where he did start moving Hopkins around more in the final years in Arizona. But I do think there is a bit of a marriage between the fantasy and NFL aspect where if you're buying into Terry McLaurin, if you're buying into this offense, you think this offense is going to be better than expected and getting into scoring position more than expected. And I mean, we're just with Cliff Kingsbury, like Patrick Mahomes played on the Cliff Kingsbury and then fell to 10 in the draft. Arizona did not go well. USC got worse. Like, I don't understand why he keeps getting these roles, but we'll see. He's got talent to go with.
But listen, first off, he's very handsome.
Well, exactly. Maybe that's why he keeps getting these roles. He's very charismatic.
He's probably very charming. I don't know. Listen, just give me this. It's the preseason.
I hope for the best.
Just like it'd be October, and you can dump on me in all October when they're 0-5. But
not before Labor Day.
Right now, just give me this, Jay Croucher. Okay. Yeah. Some of us stick with a team and just don't just don't bounce around to whatever WNBA jersey my daughter was wearing at any one point. I will say this: I think I am at wide receiver 28. It's the price tag on Terry McLaurin is just not high at all, and the upside is potential. Again, hasn't missed a game since 2020. 120 targets for 4 straight years, at least 75 receptions, at least 1,000 yards, 4 straight years, and now playing with by far the best quarterback of his career. Other than obviously future Hall of Famer Sam Howell, but even future Hall of Famer and multiple Super Bowl winner Jayden Daniels, even an upgrade there.
The Roto-World Fantasy Football Draft Guide is now available exclusively through a new partnership with Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. Get a Fantasy Life Plus subscription and receive the Roto-World Draft Guide plus fantasy, DFS, and betting tools to help you dominate the draft all season long. Use promo code ROTO10 for 10% off. Go to NBCSports.com/fantasylife to learn more. Taking our first break. When we're back, talking late-round targets at wide receiver after this. Clear the Shelters NBC Universal Locals annual nationwide pet adoption and donation campaign returns for its 10th consecutive year, August 10th to September 10th. As part of the month-long campaign, NBC and Telemundo owned and affiliated stations across the U.S. and Puerto Rico partner with animal shelters and rescue services in their communities to promote pet adoption and raise funds to support animal welfare. There's my lovely Gracie.
Gracie Rogers.
100 pounds of demon in love. All in one.
love.
She is truly a joy. If you
Careful,
can
Matthew.
rescue.
Careful, Matthew. Why are you grinning like that?
What do you got for us?
Just a beautiful dog.
There you go.
Just a beautiful dog.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Wide receiver
First. You know
You know
primer.
what I should. So I was just gonna say, someone should name a dog Leroy. Leroy is a good dog name. Don't you think?
Sure.
So you could always say like that was for
Yeah.
Leroy.
Yeah, exactly.
Every time.
Dogs are good to blame
something
stuff
falls
on.
flat.
Sure, exactly, like that moment. Just did.
Matthew's
Wide
got
receiver primer continues.
sickness
Wide receivers
percolating.
31.
Anyway, here's what happens. I'm gonna take you guys into the process here for a second. Every once in a while, like I'll have a thought and I'll be like, oh, that's funny. And then like this is all happening within milliseconds right in my brain. Like, oh, that's a funny thing. And then I'll like develop it for a second. And that's where I had that with great. And then I'm just like, oh, actually, no, you know what? That's not gonna work. And then like what happens is then you just get awkward TV, which is right there. But like I've made my name on awkward TV. That's kind of what I do.
That's all right. I mean,
Yeah.
that's how we open the show every day.
Yeah, pretty much, obviously.
So that's okay. You could have powered through.
Yeah.
Let's look at wide receivers 31 through 40. Amari Cooper
Can I tell you, I thought this shirt, at the time when I put it on this morning, very early this morning, I thought it was going to look good, but I'm on TV now, and I don't think it does. And it's my fault. I just want to be clear about this. This is not Stephanie's fault.
Well,
This
Kev
is
was
chosen
trying to
by
help
me.
you in between segments.
I know he
but
was.
There's
Poor
no
Kevin.
helping you.
There's no helping me.
Yeah,
It's
I
just not
applaud the effort, but
it's not a good
I'd
look.
say you're third out of the three of us today for sure.
I would agree with that.
Today?
I would agree with that
Yeah,
ranking.
most
I think
days.
it's, by the way, I think I'm a distant third, to be honest with you. All right, let's go back to whatever we were talking about.
Okay, we are still in Tier 4 as
Yes,
we
sir.
kick off wide receivers 31 through 40 here. Now in Tier 4, started at 24. So 31, Amari Cooper. 32, Keenan Allen.
Mm-hmm.
Now we break to Tier 5 at 33, which is kicked off by George Pickens, Chris Godwin, Deontay Johnson, Xavier Worthy, Calvin Ridley, Jayden Reed, DeAndre Hopkins, and Rome Odunze.
Boy, but just look how good Tier 5 is. Just again, you want to talk about the depth of the position here. I mean, Deontay Johnson is just, we've talked about him a lot, but he is going way too low in drafts. He's just going to get a massive target share in Carolina. Chris Godwin, they're moving back to the slot this year. You like this. We already talked about Worthy. We'll talk about Jayden Reed here in a second, but like Ridley and Hopkins, again, Tennessee's going to push the ball down the field under Brian Callahan as well. It's just, there's a lot of really interesting guys there for me. So you want to talk about Keenan? You want to talk about Jayden Reed, Connor? Where are we going?
Let's go with Keenan Allen because everybody's talking about really, it feels like two things with Keenan Allen. One, his age, and then also the apparent, weight he's gained, whether on purpose or not. So just where is the feel around Keenan Allen right now in a very busy offense out of nowhere?
Yeah, look, I'm at, obviously I have him down here in Tier 4. Like, to your point, turned 32 in April. He's missed 11 games over the last 2 seasons, and under Shane Waldron last year, who's the new offense coordinator of the Bears, but he was with Seattle last year, the Seahawks were 29th in slot targets last year. Now, all due respect to Jackson Smith and Jigba, who we like, but like he was hurt some last year, and rookie Jackson Smith and Jigba is not Keenan Allen, who, by the way, has had at least a 25% target share 8 of the last 9 seasons. He's averaged 6 receptions per game for 9 consecutive years. He was the 3rd best wide receiver in fantasy on a points per game basis last year. He was wide receiver 8. He's Keenan freaking Allen. And so I think, especially, by the way, if you're Caleb Williams, like you're looking for DJ Moore, you're looking for Keenan Allen. I prefer Moore to Allen, but I do think Allen is kind of undervalued because, again, older player, not sexy. There are some injury concerns here, but where you have to take him, he doesn't have to be a starter for you. Like, you're not going to the season unless you go like crazy running back, quarterback, tight end early. Like, generally speaking, you're not going to the season with Keenan Allen as your starting wide receiver. So even if he's going to miss some time, the fact of the matter is that when he's out there, I think he's going to be very good. Because I think Caleb Williams is going to be good. I think this Bears offense is going to be good. And I think that it's really going to be DJ Moore and Keenan Allen.
Jay, let me ask you something. With how great this Bears defense looked the second half of last year, and they went out and paid a running back a lot of money, do you have any concern about any of the pass game? Not that it's going to be inefficient, But fantasy, you need volume and numbers, and there's a lot of mouths to feed. We don't know how often they're going to truly throw.
Yeah, and we just haven't seen this quarterback in the NFL before. We haven't seen this offensive coordinator with this quarterback. There's a lot of uncertainty here, and I think that, look, going in the 30s, that's fine for Keenan Allen, but also, like, right now on Yahoo, he's going ahead of Christian Kirk and Rashee Rice. Like, give me both of those guys over Keenan Allen.
I agree with that.
And also, I think Keenan Allen is maybe the one player in the NFL whose stats last year were just most warped by his context. Because you just look at it and it's like, oh, Keenan Allen had over 1,200 yards in 13 games. It's like, watch the game. Like, watch what the Chargers were doing. There was no one else. He was just getting every target. Second on the Chargers in targets last year was Austin Eckler. Third was Gerald Everett. Like, there was nothing else. And yeah, credit to Keenan Allen. He was able to make something of those targets, but he's not going to be, like, he had 150 targets in 13 games last year. And obviously, we're baking in that is going to get reduced. It's not going to be the same deal, but just a little bit of uncertainty. So I wouldn't go in expecting Keenan Allen is definitely going to have, this 1,000+ yard season. But just with his receptions, he should be able to provide a decent floor if he stays healthy.
I will say this, too. I also think depending on how you're constructing your wide receiver room, sort of depends on what you want to do with Keenan Allen. Because I hear you, like Rashee Rice. There's also some younger, quote, more upside guys that are going around in the same range. And so I sort of feel like if I've gone sort of running back heavy and I've taken a flyer, or like if I feel less certain about my wide receiver room, then you might be like, you know what? Because I think Keenan Allen's probably more of a floor play than an upside play at this point for this coming into this year. But I feel like if I feel really rock solid about my wide receivers, I'm just like, let me just take a flyer or something like that. Then to your point, maybe there's other wide receivers with quote unquote more upside that you might want to take in this range. So I think it's also sort of how, as you're building your wide receiver room and you're constructing your roster, it's a little bit about seeing where if and where Keenan Allen fits in. You feel better about him in PPR than half PPR as well. But I do think again, I said this about DeAndre Hopkins too. He's not a sexy player, but all this guy has done when he's been healthy has produced.
Down the list at 38, Jayden Reed. Everybody's trying to figure out what Packers wide receiver do I want. And it was an interesting moment with Jordan Love this summer with Bleacher Report. He was asked to draw his unstoppable play. Let's take a listen on which wide receivers he included.
X, we're going to put we're going to put Romeo Doubs out there. Just because, that's one of my favorite fade targets. Whenever I throw it up to him, he is going to come down with the ball. I know that 100%. So this is my play. We can run it backed up, middle of the field, red zone. I think there's touchdowns all over the place. DeVonta Adams choice route, Romeo Doubs on a little fade, Travis Kelce on a through route across the middle, Tyreek Hill on a little slot fade, Josh Jacobs on a hitch out there. So that's my play right there. Unstoppable.
So a ton of fantasy superstars, and then Romeo Doubs.
Yes.
No slight against Romeo Doubs. It's just interesting when we talk about their four wide receivers all the time that he included Romeo Doubs, who's had some massive moments with Jordan Love.
But you know what? Listen, watching that clip, it makes me feel like he just feels really good about Romeo Doubs running that one route. Yeah. I don't think that was
which he did in college all the time.
Right, exactly. It didn't feel like that was him saying, like, listen, I don't like Jayden Reed, Christian Watson, or Dontavian
like
Wicks.
When Stroud put Tank Dell in his offense, we did that clip. Remember?
Yes. When Stroud did that, he was just like, these are three of the best guys. Exactly. That way, just listening to that clip, Jordan Love was talking about, like, listen, here's my perfect play. I want a tight end to run over the middle. All right, give me Travis Kelce. Like, he figured out what play he wanted, then he figured out which guys could do what routes within that play to make his, quote, perfect play. And, he talked about Tyreek Hill as well. And so, I don't know. I don't take a lot into that clip. I will say that I love getting the Packers wide receivers in a best ball format. I will say that I think every week, I think Jordan Love's going to have a monster year, especially if you look at their schedule, their early schedule. Like, it's great. The Packers' early schedule is fantastic. And so I think Jordan Love's going to have a hot start, and I think you're going to have at least one, if not two, wide receivers every week have big games for the Packers offense. I think it's going to be tough to predict which one is on any given week. If I had to pick, I have some Dobbs as well. I have almost no Christian Watson just because of the injuries and that's a concern here as well. But I feel like as we watch that offense sort of grow up last year, feels like Jayden Reed and Dontavian Wicks are two guys that really sort of came more into their own Dobbs and Watson were what they were, and they were good, and they were fine, and everything like that. But felt like we saw growth from Reed and Wicks. I don't know if you saw the same thing.
Yeah, I loved what I saw from Jayden Reed as a rookie. I think he gets manufactured touches. I think he's a quietly very good route runner, especially when they use him in the slot. I'd be very high on Jayden Reed this year. When people ask me this question, that's who I say there's actually a pretty good gap for me. I think he's going to have an elevated role.
Yeah, he finished as wide receiver 25 last year, which I think goes a bit under the radar. I think the Packers situation overall might be the most interesting in the league in terms of pass catches, because last year they finished as the number 5 offense in football, and they didn't really seem to know what they were doing the first half of the season.
Yeah.
They still finished as a top 5 offense. It's like one of the youngest offenses that we've ever seen at skill position and quarterback combined, so I think that they should get better. And I think there's a little bit of a logical inconsistency where last year Romeo Doubs led the Packers in targets. He had almost 100 targets. He led the team, and he's going 62nd among wide receivers on Yahoo. Like, it's a top 5 offense, and he's led them in targets. Like, I can't go see. He just turned 24 years old as well. So I think that, look, I don't think that he's going to be their top receiver. I think that will be Jayden Reed, and I think Wicks has more upside. Watson has more upside, even if Watson's median outcome might be 4th among these guys because of the injury concerns. But Dobbs is worth, I think, a late-round flyer, certainly.
Slight concern on Jayden Reed in terms of touchdown regression. He had 10 touchdowns last year on just 75 touches, but an increased role. And again, you sort of feel like his role is the most secure. Like, you'll see Watson and Dobbs on the outside. Wicks will work his way in as the 4th wide receiver, but Reed's going to be in the slot. Like, Reed is their slot guy, and that's an area of the field that Jordan Love is very comfortable throwing. So, Jayden Reed, to me, if I'm throwing a dart at which Packers wide receiver, I kind of like Reed, and I like Wicks because he's the cheapest of the 4 as well. But I hear you on Dobbs as well. Like, there's value in all these guys. I think just the consistency is going to be tough to figure out.
Speaking of Wicks, let's look at some late-round deep league targets, a list that he is included on. Jamison Williams, Josh Palmer, Rashid Shaheed, Khalil Shakir, Darnell Mooney, Jalen McMillan, Greg Dortch, Andre Yosevich, and Luke McCaffrey. Jay, who on this list stands out to you?
So the guy for me is Josh Palmer, who some places going outside the top 45 wide receivers. Like, the reality is, again, just very simply, he looks like he's going to be Justin Herbert's number 1 wide receiver.
Yes.
And I understand that this offense probably isn't going to throw that much. It's not going to be an explosive passing game. Someone has to catch the ball.
Yes.
Justin Herbert is a top 7 quarterback in the NFL on talent. Like, he's going to throw the ball.
Correct.
And Josh Palmer would be the favorite in the market to be the Chargers' number 1 wide receiver, and thus I think he is certainly worth a flyer.
Jay, I'm kind of using the same thought process when I see Khalil Shakir on that list. I understand Dalton Kincaid is a target monster in that offense, but I think people are investing a little too much early hope in Keon Coleman as a rookie. Curtis Samuel's dealing with a turf toe. They think he should be ready for week 1. They're not definitively saying it. Khalil Shakir is going to fall into a lot of catches in this offense with an elite quarterback.
For sure. My only concern is Curtis Samuel, who they brought in, who has a familiarity with Joe Brady as well. And so do they kind of cancel each other out? But I think both Shakir's on this list for me, as is Curtis Samuel. Like, both guys I think are very worthwhile late-round targets as well. Give you a couple other people in this. Darnell Mooney, like, no one's really talking about Darnell Mooney. Like we've talked about, we expect the Falcons offense to be better. Cousins throwing more, obviously. London, Pitts, Bijan Robinson. But Darnell Mooney's going to be the number 2 wide receiver in a dome on a pass-first offense under Zach Robinson. Again, Zach Robinson from the LA camp. They go 3 wide receivers a lot. Like, I think Darnell Mooney's going to be out there a lot more than people think. We've talked about the human Dortch, Greg Dortch. I think he's going to have a big year. Kyler Murray, of course, my ride or die. And Dortch's numbers with Murray, especially with Rondell Moore no longer there, and like they've sort of, it's a much narrower target tree to me in Arizona. So I really like Dortch, especially in PPR. Jalen McMillan is playing like every snap with the starters for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Looks like he's locked down that number 3 wide receiver role. It's obviously Evans and Godwin, but what do people that may not be familiar with Jalen McMillan not realize?
Well, he comes from this Washington offense where when they used him in the slot, he looked great. He needed to get stronger. He got a lot stronger from even his last year at college to his NFL training camp, which play strength was the number 1 thing for me. This is a guy that I really like if Chris Godwin inevitably gets hurt again. Until then, I think the targets aren't going to be there for him. But if Godwin gets hurt and he's a guy that's been banged up before, it feels like McMillan is going to get a lot of work.
And then the last one, Andre Yosevich. Like, I know everyone's excited for Jermaine Burton, but like Yosevich is there. He has the trust of Joe Burrow, and so like you've got I think he's going to be their slot guy. Like, he's going to replace Tyler Boyd. It's going to be Higgins and Chase on the outside, and we're waiting. It's second half of the year, maybe Jermaine Burton. But for right now, it's going to be Andre Yoshevich, who has good hands and has the trust of Joe Burrow.
Fantasy season just got better this season. $1 million better. Creator join a private Yahoo Fantasy League and enter the $1 million NBC sweepstakes, plus earn extra entries to win when players on your fantasy roster score a touchdown during an opening weekend game on NBC or Peacock. Download the redesigned Yahoo Fantasy app or go to NBCSports.com/fantasymillion to learn more. We're taking one more break. When we're back, who is the best bet to lead the league in receiving yards? We'll make our picks after this.
A reminder, Luke McCaffrey is going to be a thing this year.
DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet touchdowns, and new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Plus, get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the app and use promo code Barry when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. It's time for last call. Let's look at the regular season receiving yards leaderboard, courtesy of our friends at DraftKings. Jay, what are we going with here?
Going with Justin Jefferson, who's plus 1,000. He won this 2 years ago, past 3 years in receiving yards per game. He's finished second, first, and third. He's going to get a ton of targets, plays in a dome as well, which I really like for this. So give me Justin Jefferson at 10-1.
I'll go chalk here, and I'll take my should-have-been ride or die Garrett Wilson, plus 1,400. Lock it in. What do you got, Matthew?
Look, I actually agree with Justin Jefferson, but just to give another option out here, my ride or die from last year, Amon-Ra St. Brown. We've talked about this all the time. 14 of his 17 games are indoors. They're going to be they're going to be throwing a decent amount. Amon-Ra, who the touchdowns are in concern, but the target volume and the yards are not. So he absolutely has a shot in what could be the Lions' final Super Bowl year. Finally, they get to the big dance. So give me Amon-Ra St. Brown at 11-1.
Yep, no, I like that. I think people get really tied up in the idea that he's not a deep ball threat. Like, if he's just racking up 110 yards per game, then that's all you need to be able to get to 1,700 yards.
That is all you need. All right, listen, it's closing time, which means you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. For Jay Croucher, for Connor Rogers, and for Leroy Seabrooks, rest in peace. I am merely Matthew Barry. We will see you tomorrow. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Barry from NBCSports.com and RotorWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.